The CEO just screamed at the janitor right in the middle of the company's most important meeting, and no one even blinked. The hallway outside the glass-walled boardroom was quiet, sterile, almost cold. A mop squeaked gently against the polished floor as a man moved steadily back and forth, his eyes calm yet tired. He wore simple clothes, a faded grey shirt, and worn shoes, his face marked by years of quiet patience. No one looked twice at him. He was just another janitor. Inside, the company's top executives debated fiercely. The air was thick with tension and anticipation. This meeting could decide millions in contracts. But outside, the janitor moved unnoticed. A ghost passing through a world of power. Suddenly, the heavy door slammed open. The CEO stormed out, his sharp eyes locking on the janitor as if he'd found the source of all his frustrations. "What are you doing here?" The voice cut through the quiet like a whip. The janitor paused. He lowered his mop, meeting the CEO's glare without flinching. "I'm cleaning, sir," he said quietly. The CEO's face twisted in anger. "That floor was supposed to be spotless 10 minutes ago. You're slowing us down. This is unacceptable." His voice rose, echoing off the walls. "You're incompetent. Get out now." The janitor nodded once and began to push his mop again, slower this time, burdened by the harsh words. No one stepped in. A few employees nearby glanced away, uncomfortable but silent. Some whispered behind cupped hands, their eyes flicking between the janitor and the furious CEO. Then, a young assistant peeked from the meeting room door, her face anxious. "Sir, he's just doing his job," she said softly. The CEO whipped toward her, cold and dismissive. "Mind your own business," he snapped. "Focus on your tasks and stay out of this." She swallowed and retreated silently. Unseen by most, a woman from Human Resources leaned against the nearby wall, arms crossed, studying the janitor. Her expression shifted from annoyance to something else, a flicker of suspicion. Why did this man look so calm, so different? Minutes later, the CEO turned away, muttering about inefficiency and distractions. The janitor finished his task, gathered his bucket, and moved down the hall. As he rounded the corner, the HR woman hesitated, then followed quietly. She spotted a small folded note near the trash bin. Picking it up, she read the words, "Not all who serve are unseen." Her eyes widened. Who was this man? The story of the janitor's quiet dignity, humiliated yet unshaken, was more than just a moment of corporate cruelty. It was a puzzle begging to be solved. Why did the HR woman's expression change? Why did the janitor leave a cryptic message? Behind, inside the boardroom, the CEO's outburst was already the subject of hushed conversations. Some questioned his harshness. Others avoided the topic entirely. But no one dared confront the reality of what had just happened. Outside, the janitor moved with quiet purpose. His shoulders were squared, but there was a shadow in his eyes, a story behind his calm. Back in the hallway, whispers began to spread. "Did you see that?" The CEO yelling at the janitor like he was nothing. "Yeah, who does that? What's wrong with him? Maybe the janitor messed up." "No, I've seen him around, he's always so calm." "Maybe there's more to this guy." The young assistant who had tried to defend him watched from the doorway, heart pounding. She wished she could do more. The janitor, meanwhile, stopped for a moment outside the elevator. He glanced down at his hands, rough, worn, and then to the small pendant hanging around his neck. It was old, a silver charm shaped like a tiny heart. He touched it gently, as if drawing strength. In the nearby break room, a few employees shook their heads. That CEO, too arrogant for his own good. Yeah, yelling at a janitor in front of everyone. Not professional. One man, a security guard named Mike, watched the footage of the incident playing on his phone, his jaw clenched. "That janitor doesn't deserve this," Mike muttered. "No one does. But speaking up around here was risky." The CEO didn't tolerate dissent. The janitor returned to his duties, silently sweeping the floors of the bustling office spaces. No one asked for his story, no one cared, Yet, in his quiet steps was a strength that few could see. The HR woman, Jennifer, slipped into the janitor's usual cleaning closet after he left. Examining the note again. Not all who serve are unseen. What did it mean? She looked at the janitor's mop and bucket, then to the janitor's locker nearby. Plain, unremarkable. But there was something about this man, something hidden beneath the surface. Jennifer's mind raced. Was this just a man enduring a harsh world, or was there more? That evening, as the office emptied and lights dimmed, the janitor sat alone on a bench outside the building. The night air was cool, the city lights flickering like distant stars. He pulled out an old photo from his jacket pocket, a black and white image of a small boy holding his grandmother's hand, both smiling softly. The janitor's eyes welled up, but his expression remained steady. A promise whispered years ago filled his heart, to always live with kindness, no matter the cost. Back inside, the CEO reviewed the meeting notes but couldn't shake the image of the janitor standing silently in the hall. Something about that quiet man unsettled him. Was it guilt or fear? The CEO shook his head and turned back to his computer, unwilling to face the truth. Meanwhile, Jennifer was determined. She started digging quietly, asking questions about the janitor's background. No one seemed to know much. But she noticed the way other employees glanced at him, not with contempt, but with a strange respect hidden beneath the surface. The janitor wasn't just any worker. The next morning, as the sun rose over the city, the janitor arrived early. He stood in the lobby for a moment, looking up at the towering glass building. He was a man caught between two worlds, invisible, yet unbreakable, and this was just the beginning. The morning light spilled into the glass building, its sharp rays cutting through the sterile corridors like a spotlight on the day's unfolding drama. The janitor, Keanu, moved quietly through the office halls, mop in hand, carefully avoiding the eyes of the busy employees who hurried past him, heads down and focused on their own tasks. No one greeted him. Some glanced his way with thinly veiled disdain, but the echo of yesterday's outburst still lingered in the air. The CEO's harsh words had carved a wound deeper than anyone wanted to admit. As Keanu cleaned, whispers trailed behind him. Did you see how the CEO yelled at him like he was nothing? Who does that? Maybe he's hiding something. The conversations were quiet, but the tone was unmistakably cruel. Despite the chatter, Keanu remained calm. His movements were deliberate, his expression unreadable. No anger, no bitterness, just a quiet strength that seemed out of place among the cold cubicles and glass walls. Later that morning, the CEO returned to the building, his sharp gaze sweeping the floor with renewed irritation. When he spotted Keanu near the elevators, a flash of impatience crossed his face. "Stop what you're doing," the CEO barked. "I don't want you anywhere near the main floors during work hours. You're a distraction." Keanu stopped, nodded politely, and began to move away without a word. Across the hall, a young assistant named Lily watched with growing unease. She had admired Keanu's quiet dignity since she'd started working there, but now she saw him treated like dirt. She clenched her fists, struggling to decide whether to stay silent or stand up. Unable to hold back, Lily stepped forward. "Sir, he hasn't done anything wrong," she said quietly, but firmly. "He's just doing his job." The CEO spun toward, her eyes cold and unforgiving. "Mind your place, Lily. Focus on your work, or you'll find yourself out of a job." Lily swallowed her fear, but held her ground. "I'm just asking for fairness." Before she could say more, the CEO waved his hand dismissively. "Enough. Back to your desk." Lily retreated, heart pounding but undeterred. Meanwhile, Keanu's day continued with a strange rhythm. A few moments later, he noticed a coffee cup lying on the floor near a meeting room. Without hesitation, he bent down to pick it up, careful not to spill a drop. His movement was graceful, almost gentle, and a few employees paused to watch him. One whispered, "Why is he so calm? Like he's used to this." Another muttered, "There's something about him, ... But what?" Keanu straightened, glancing briefly toward the CEO's office. The CEO was visible through the glass walls, speaking on the phone, his expression throughout the day. Subtle signs began to emerge. A security guard gave Keanu a brief nod of respect. A cleaning colleague lowered her voice when mentioning him, as if protecting a secret. The atmosphere around Keanu was shifting, but no one dared speak openly. As the afternoon shadows lengthened, a sudden interruption shattered the office calm. The CEO stormed into the break room where Lily was having a quiet moment. "Lily?" he growled. "I hear you're stirring trouble again." Lily looked up, determined. "I'm only speaking the truth." The CEO's glare hardened. "If you want to keep your job, stay away from that janitor, understand?" Lily met his gaze. Steadily, "I won't stop standing up for what's right." The tension was electric. Lily's courage ignited a spark in those who witnessed the exchange. Later, as the workday wound down, Keanu finished his tasks and prepared to leave. On his way out, he paused near a window, gazing at the city skyline. A young intern approached. Quietly, "Hey, Keanu, I just wanted to say thanks. You're the only one who's been kind around here." Keanu smiled softly. "Kindness doesn't cost a thing." The intern's eyes glistened with unshed tears. "I hope someday you know how important that is." Keanu nodded, his heart heavy yet hopeful. That night, the office was quiet, but the battle lines had been drawn. The CEO's arrogance and cruelty had stirred resistance. The janitor's quiet strength had inspired hope, and somewhere, a question lingered. Who was this man who bore humiliation with grace? No one knew the answer yet, but the story was far from over. The soft glow of the morning sun slipped through the dusty window of a small, worn-down apartment, casting long shadows across the creaky wooden floor. Inside, a young boy sat on the edge of a threadbare couch, clutching a faded photograph in his hands. His eyes were large, filled with a mixture of wonder and sadness that seemed far too deep for his years. This boy was Keanu, years before the world knew him as a famous actor. Long before the janitor uniform replaced the glitz and glamour, his life had been shaped by quiet struggles and profound losses that no one could see beneath the surface. The apartment was modest. The peeling wallpaper and the tired furniture told stories of hard times, but there was warmth here in the form of the woman sitting beside him, her silver hair framing a face lined with kindness and resilience. "Promise me one thing, Keanu," she said gently, placing a wrinkled hand on his small shoulder. "No matter where life takes you, never lose your kindness. Always treat people with respect, even when they don't deserve it." Keanu looked up at her, eyes shining with determination. "I promise, Grandma." Her smile was soft but filled with strength. "Good, because kindness is the true measure of a person." This was the foundation of who Keanu was, a promise made in the quiet corners of a life filled with hardship. The memories swirled like mist as the years passed. The loss of his parents when he was very young, the long nights spent comforting a grieving grandmother, the times when there was barely enough money for food. Through it all, Keanu held tight to that promise. He found solace in small things, the kindness of a stranger who once gave him a warm meal, the gentle words of a teacher who believed in him, the quiet strength he learned from his grandmother. Those moments shaped his heart, teaching him that true greatness wasn't in fame or fortune, but in how you treated others. Back then, before the lights and cameras, Keanu had dreamed of a simple life, one filled with meaning, compassion, and dignity. It was a life where he could make a difference, not by being the loudest voice in the room, but by quietly lifting others up. And yet, life had other plans. He rose to fame, capturing hearts with his talent and humility. But even as the world celebrated him, Keanu remained grounded, refusing to let success change the core of who he was. Now, years later, dressed in a janitor's uniform, the weight of those early lessons rested heavily on his shoulders. As the present came rushing back, Keanu stood in the empty hallway, staring at the cold tiles beneath his feet. His fingers brushed against the small silver pendant hanging around his neck, the same heart-shaped charm his grandmother had given him long ago. A deep breath escaped his lips. In the silence, he whispered the words he'd carried all his life. kindness. Above all, the faint sound of footsteps approached. Jennifer from Human Resources stepped out of the shadows, breaking the quiet. "You're not like anyone here," she said softly, watching him with new eyes. Keanu turned, offering a small, knowing smile. "Sometimes, people carry more than you can see," he replied. Jennifer nodded slowly. "I want to understand. Who are you really?" He hesitated, then shook his head. "That's a story for another time." Before she could ask more, the sharp voice of the CEO echoed down the hall, slicing through the moment. "Get back to work, and don't cause any more distractions." Keanu's expression hardened, just briefly, before returning to calm. "Yes, sir." As the CEO disappeared into his office, Jennifer lingered, her curiosity growing. There was something about Keanu that didn't fit the image of a simple janitor. Something deeper, a story waiting to be told. The day pressed on, but the memory of that quiet exchange lingered. Keanu worked steadily, his movements precise and purposeful. His eyes occasionally drifted to the bustling offices around him, the people caught in their own worlds of ambition and stress, unaware of the man walking silently among them. Inside the promise he made long ago, echoed with every step. 2. Be kind, no matter the cost. The contrast between his past and present was stark. The child who once clung to a grandmother's wisdom was now a man walking through halls filled with cold judgment and misplaced cruelty. But the fire inside him remained unbroken, as the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows through the buildings. Windows. Keanu paused near a window overlooking the city skyline. The lights below twinkled like distant stars. Reminding him of dreams still alive, he clenched his fist gently. Feeling the weight of his past, the hope for the future, and the quiet power of the present. In that moment, Keanu wasn't just a janitor. He was a man shaped by love, loss, and unwavering kindness. A man who would not be broken by harsh words or unjust treatment. And as the evening settled, the stage was set. The story of the janitor who carried the heart of a hero was only beginning. The day began like any other inside the sleek office building, its bright fluorescent lights humming softly overhead as employees moved briskly between meetings and deadlines. But beneath the polished surface, a subtle tension lingered, a quiet storm brewing just out of sight. Keanu, the janitor, pushed his mop along the hallway, eyes calm and focused. His uniform was simple, blending seamlessly into the background of suits and ties. He moved with the grace of someone who had learned patience through years of hardship. But his presence did not go unnoticed. Near the staff cafeteria, a young woman named Sarah watched him from across the room. Sarah worked as a waitress, often delivering coffee and snacks to the busy employees. She had noticed Keanu's quiet dignity and the unfair treatment he'd endured. That morning, as Keanu passed her station, his gaze briefly met hers. There was a flicker of exhaustion in his eyes, but also a warmth that reached across the space between them. Sarah smiled softly and called out, "Hey Keanu, need a bottle of water?" He paused, surprised by the kindness, then nodded gratefully. "Thank you, Sarah." She handed him the bottle with a gentle smile. "You deserve it." A small gesture, but in the cold atmosphere of the office, it was a beacon of humanity. However, their moment did not go unnoticed. Across the room, the CEO's eyes narrowed as he watched the exchange. His lips curled into a sneer. "That's enough," he muttered to himself, then strode toward Sarah's station. Sarah's heart pounded as the CEO approached. She stood taller, refusing to be intimidated. "Sarah," he said sharply, "I heard about your little act of kindness toward the janitor." Sarah met his gaze steadily. "He's just a person, sir. Like anyone else." The CEO's voice dropped to a cold warning. "This company doesn't tolerate distractions. If you continue, there will be consequences." Sarah swallowed hard, but nodded. "I understand." As he walked away, Sarah's hands trembled slightly, but her spirit remained unbroken. Keanu watched from a distance, his eyes reflecting gratitude mixed with concern. He knew that kindness in this place came at a price. Later that afternoon, Sarah found herself called into a meeting with human resources. Jennifer, the HR woman who had been quietly observing Keanu, sat behind her desk with a serious expression. "Sarah, we've received complaints about your behavior," Jennifer said gently. "Specifically, your interactions with the janitor." Sarah's brow furrowed. "I was just trying to be kind." Jennifer nodded slowly. "I understand, but you have to be careful. The CEO is watching, and he doesn't appreciate any disruptions." Sarah's shoulders sagged. "So I'm being punished for being kind?" Jennifer's eyes softened. "It's complicated. Sometimes doing the right thing isn't easy here." Sarah left the office feeling a mix of frustration and sadness. She had never imagined that a simple act of kindness could lead to this. Meanwhile, Keanu continued his work, moving through the building with silent resolve. As he passed the break room, he noticed Sarah sitting alone, her usual bright demeanor dimmed. He approached quietly. "Sarah," he said softly. She looked up, surprised but grateful. "Keanu," he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, folded piece of paper. "For you." Sarah took the note and unfolded it. Written in neat handwriting were the words, "Kindness is never wasted." Tears welled in Sarah's eyes. "Thank you." Keanu smiled gently. "Keep being kind. The world needs it." Their exchange was brief, but powerful, a moment of human connection, in a place often marked by cold ambition. But not everyone was pleased. Word of Sarah's kindness and the note spread quietly through the office. Reaching the CEO's ears once again, his frustration grew. He summoned his assistant, barking orders to keep a closer eye on both Sarah and Keanu. "This ends now," he vowed. "No more distractions." Despite the mounting pressure, the small acts of kindness began to ripple through the company. A few employees, inspired by Sarah's courage, offered quiet support to Keanu, a nod in the hallway, a smile in passing. Even Jennifer found herself reconsidering the harshness of the CEO's stance, her curiosity about Keanu deepening. As the day drew to a close, Keanu stood near the building's main entrance. Watching the city lights flicker against the darkening sky, Sarah approached, carrying a warm drink. "Here," she said, handing it to him. "You deserve this." Keanu accepted it gratefully. "Thank you." They stood in companionable silence, two souls connected by compassion in a world that often forgot the value of kindness. In that quiet moment, the weight of the day's challenges seemed lighter, but the CEO's threats still hung in the air. Reminder that the battle between cruelty and compassion was far from over. As Keanu prepared to leave, he looked back once more, a flicker of determination shining in his eyes. He would not forget the kindness shown to him, and he would not let injustice define his story. The path ahead was uncertain, but one thing was clear. In a world that often turned a blind eye, small acts of kindness could shine brighter than the coldest glare of power. The morning sun filtered softly through the towering windows of the corporate building, casting long shadows over the gleaming floors. Inside the bustling lobby, whispers had begun to spread, an invisible current, shifting the atmosphere from cold indifference to stunned curiosity. Keanu moved steadily through the crowd, mop in hand, his expression calm, as always. But today, the usual cold stares and dismissive glances were starting to falter. Something was different. Something was about to change. Earlier that morning, during the usual rush of the CEO's important meeting, an unexpected visitor had arrived. Woman carrying a camera and a determined look. Jennifer, the HR representative who had been quietly observing Keanu for days, greeted the visitor in the lobby. "Are you sure about this?" Jennifer asked softly. The woman nodded. It's time the truth came out. Together, they approached the main conference room, where the meeting was still in session. The CEO sat at the head of the table, commanding attention with his sharp tone and confident demeanor. But before he could continue, the door opened abruptly. The visitor stepped inside. Camera-rolling eyes locked on Keanu. "Excuse me," she said, her voice clear and firm. "I have something to show you all." She turned the screen of her camera toward the room, revealing images of a man many recognized immediately, the famous actor, humanitarian, an icon, Keanu Reeves. Gasps echoed around the room. The CEO's face paled as realization dawned. The janitor, this quiet, humble man, was no ordinary employee. He was the man they had all admired from afar, the one whose kindness had touched millions. How is this possible? Someone whispered. The CEO swallowed hard, his usual arrogance slipping away, replaced by shock and embarrassment. Keanu stood quietly, eyes scanning the room, calm yet filled with quiet strength. He had expected this moment, but remained composed. "I'm the same person I've always been," Keanu began, his voice steady. "Whether on a stage or behind a mop, kindness and respect are the true measure of a person." The room fell silent. Some faces showed shame, others admiration. A few employees began to clap softly, the sound growing into a ripple of genuine applause. The CEO cleared his throat, struggling to regain control. "Mr. Reeves, I didn't know." Keanu smiled gently. "That's the point. Too often, people judge others by appearances and forget to look deeper," he continued, addressing everyone with quiet authority. "I don't seek vengeance or recognition here. I seek understanding, a reminder that everyone deserves dignity." His words hung in the air, heavy and meaningful. A young intern, eyes wide with emotion, whispered, "I had no idea." The CEO lowered his gaze, humbled. "I owe you an apology." Keanu nodded. Apologies are a good start, but actions matter more. The tension in the room shifted. What had begun as a moment of confrontation became one of reflection and change. Jennifer stepped forward, smiling. "Thank you for reminding us what truly matters." As the meeting adjourned, employees gathered around Keanu, offering handshakes, smiles, and words of gratitude. The CEO lingered, watching from a distance, his mind racing with newfound respect and regret. Outside the conference room, Sarah, the waitress who had stood by Keanu, wiped tears from her eyes. "He didn't need to prove anything," she said softly. "He just lived it." Keanu looked at her, his smile warm. Kindness doesn't need proof, it just needs a heart. The day marked a turning point not just for Keanu, but for everyone who had witnessed the quiet courage of a man who refused to be defined by appearances. As the sun set, the office felt different, lighter, more human. And Keanu. He returned to his duties with the same humble grace, knowing that sometimes the greatest revelations come not from loud declarations, but from simple acts of kindness. The office was buzzing like never before. The news about Keanu the janitor, who was also a beloved actor, had spread like wildfire. What began as whispers in the hallways had exploded into conversations across the city. Screens showed clips from the meeting, videos recorded by employees who had watched the big reveal unfold. Social media lit up. Posts praising Keanu's humility and kindness flooded timelines, drawing millions of hearts, shares, and comments. Headlines hailed him as a real-life hero, a man who chose grace over fame, dignity over anger. Back inside the company, the atmosphere had shifted. People who had once ignored or dismissed Keanu now stopped to greet him warmly. His presence, once invisible, became a symbol of quiet strength. Jennifer, the HR woman, felt a swell of pride as she watched the changes ripple through the office. She had taken a chance by supporting Keanu and pushing for the truth. Now, her efforts were paying off. One morning, as Keanu passed through the lobby, Sarah, the waitress who had stood by him during the darkest times, approached him with a bright smile. "Keanu, the whole company is talking about you," she said. "You're inspiring everyone." He smiled gently. Kindness isn't about recognition, it's about how we treat each other every day. Meanwhile, the CEO faced growing pressure. The video of his harsh treatment of Keanu had gone viral, sparking outrage from viewers worldwide. His public image took a hit as calls for accountability grew louder. In an emergency board meeting, executives urged the CEO to apologize and make amends. The CEO reluctantly agreed, realizing the gravity of the situation. Yet behind closed doors, his pride battled with remorse. The man who had yelled at a janitor now faced the consequences of his cruelty. Despite the CEO's struggles, the positive wave continued. The employees who had quietly supported Keanu found their voices. Some shared stories of other overlooked colleagues, shining light on kindness and respect throughout the company. Jennifer spearheaded a new initiative promoting empathy and fairness. Inspired by Keanu's example, training sessions, workshops, and open forums were scheduled to transform the workplace culture. Keanu, however, remained humble, rarely speaking about the attention. He focused on his work, his quiet dedication unchanged. One afternoon, Mike, the security guard who had admired Keanu's strength, approached him. "Keanu, you've changed a lot around here," Mike said, shaking his head in amazement. Keanu smiled softly. "Change starts with small steps. Sometimes, all it takes is one person choosing kindness." Outside the building, reporters gathered, eager for interviews. Keanu politely declined most requests, preferring to keep his life private. But his message was clear. Kindness is universal and does not depend on fame or recognition. As the weeks passed, Sarah received a surprising offer. Moved by her courage and loyalty, the company promoted her to a new role. Giving her a voice in shaping employee welfare, Sarah hugged Keanu tightly. "Thank you for believing in me." Keanu looked into her eyes. "Thank you for standing by me." The CEO, humbled by the experience, finally issued a public apology. "I regret my actions and vow to learn from this," he said. "We must all treat each other with respect." Some employees accepted his apology, others remained cautious. But one thing was certain: the company would never be the same. The story of the janitor-turned-hero had sparked a transformation, just in one man, but in an entire culture. Keanu watched quietly. Proud, but unassuming. He knew the real victory was in the kindness that now spread through the halls. In the smiles, the support, and the shared hope for a better future. The journey was far from over, but the seed of change had been planted, and sometimes, that was enough. The morning sun filtered through the blinds of a modest office on the company's lower floor. The quiet hum of computers and low murmur of conversations filled the space, but today, the atmosphere was different. There was a sense of hope, of something new taking root. Keanu sat across from Sarah, the waitress who had stood by him during the toughest days. The two shared a simple lunch, sandwiches and coffee, but the moment was far from ordinary. Sarah looked nervous, her hands twisting a napkin in her lap. "Keanu, I don't know how to say this, but the company offered me a full-time position in the employee welfare department. I'm going to be able to help others the way you helped me." Keanu's eyes softened. "That's wonderful, Sarah. You earned it," she smiled, tears threatening to spill. "I couldn't have done it without you." The memory of the CEO's harsh words and the countless hours of uncertainty faded in the warmth of this new beginning. But Keanu had something else on his mind. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small envelope, handing it to Sarah. "There's more." Sarah opened it carefully. Inside was a letter and a key to a modest apartment nearby, fully furnished and ready. Sarah gasped, "Keanu, this is too much." He shook his head. "It's not about me. It's about giving back to those who show kindness. You believed in me when it was hard, and now it's my turn to help you." Tears streamed down Sarah's face. "I don't know how to thank you." Keanu smiled gently. "Just promise me you'll keep spreading kindness." Their conversation was interrupted by the sound of footsteps. Jennifer, the HR representative, entered, her face lighting up when she saw the two. "I heard about your new role, Sarah. Congratulations. And Keanu, thank you for everything you've done." Keanu nodded, humbly accepting the gratitude. Later that day, news of Keanu's generous gift and Sarah's promotion spread through the office like wildfire. Employees marveled at the unexpected kindness shown by someone many had underestimated. The CEO, now humbled by the recent events, approached Keanu privately. "I want to apologize again," he said, voice sincere, "and to thank you for teaching me a lesson I won't forget." Keanu looked him in the eye. "The only lesson worth learning is to treat others with respect. It's never too late to start." The CEO nodded, a weight visibly lifting from his shoulders. Not everyone, however, embraced the change. A few employees whispered behind closed doors, clinging to old grudges and skepticism. But their voices grew quieter as the tide of compassion swept through the company. One afternoon, Sarah invited Keanu to a small gathering, a celebration for the new welfare program. As they sat among co-workers and friends, laughter and warmth filled the room. A young intern raised a glass. "To Keanu, a man who showed us what true strength and kindness look like." The toast was met with cheers and applause. Keanu smiled, his heart full. He knew this was more than just a moment of recognition. It was a turning point for everyone involved. As the party wound down, Sarah pulled Keanu aside. "I want you to know that your kindness changed my life forever." Keanu's eyes glistened. "And you've changed mine?" Just before leaving, Keanu addressed the small crowd with quiet conviction. "Nobody needs to know my name to make a difference," he said. "Kindness is a choice we all can make every day. That's the truth. Gift." His words settled like a warm embrace over the room. That night, as Keanu walked home beneath the glow of streetlights, he reflected on the journey. From the shadows of invisibility to a beacon of hope, his story was proof that even the smallest acts could ripple into profound change. And as he disappeared into the quiet streets, one thing was clear. The power of kindness was unstoppable. The evening air was cool and quiet as Keanu stepped outside the company building for the last time. That day, the sun was setting, casting a warm golden glow over the city skyline. Around him, people hurried home or gathered in small groups, but Keanu moved with calm purpose, his mind reflecting on the journey that had brought him here. The office, once cold and unkind, had transformed. The harsh voices and dismissive glances had been replaced by respect, kindness, and hope. It was a change born not from force or anger, but from quiet courage and a simple truth. Every person deserves dignity. As Keanu walked toward the nearby park, he noticed a small group gathered around a young boy sitting on a bench. The child looked up at him with wide, curious eyes. Keanu smiled and sat beside him. "Are you okay?" Keanu asked gently. The boy nodded, clutching a small toy car. "I heard about you. You're a hero." Keanu chuckled softly. "I'm no hero. Just someone who believes kindness matters." The boy looked puzzled. "But you changed everything," Keanu nodded. "Sometimes, it only takes one person to start a wave of change." The boy's mother approached, smiling warmly. "Thank you for being an example for all of us." Keanu stood and looked back at the city lights beginning to twinkle. "Kindness doesn't need a name," he said softly. "It just needs a heart." As he walked away, his footsteps light on the pavement, a quiet peace settled over him. The battles fought, the struggles endured, they all pointed to this moment of quiet triumph. Back inside the building, Sarah sat at her desk, writing a letter. It was addressed to the company's employees, a message of hope and encouragement. Inspired by everything she had witnessed, she wrote about the power of empathy, the importance of standing up for what is right, and the lasting impact of simple kindness. The next morning, the letter was shared across the company. Employees read it aloud in meetings, discussed it in break rooms, and carried its message into their daily lives. Jennifer, now leading the employee welfare program, often quoted the letter in her talks. It reminds us why we work not just for success, but for humanity. Meanwhile, the CEO had begun a slow but sincere effort to rebuild trust. He implemented new policies, encouraged open communication, and sought ways to listen more and judge less. Though his journey was just beginning, the humility he showed marked a significant step forward. For Keanu, however, the spotlight was no longer the goal. He continued his work with quiet dedication, a steady presence in a world that had learned to see him differently. One day, as he finished his tasks, Jennifer approached with a small box wrapped in simple paper. "For you," she said. Keanu opened it to find the silver heart-shaped pendant, the very same one his grandmother had given him years ago, now polished and shining. "It's a symbol," Jennifer explained, "of kindness, strength, and the difference one person can make." Keanu smiled, touched beyond words, as he clasped the pendant around his neck. He felt the weight of the journey and the promise it carried. That evening, a final scene unfolded outside the building. Sarah stood near the entrance, watching Keanu disappear into the quiet streets. A colleague beside her whispered, "Who was that man, really?" Sarah smiled softly. "That wasn't just a janitor. That was a lesson in kindness, walking among us." The colleague nodded, eyes thoughtful. And so the story closed, not with loud fanfare, but with the quiet, powerful truth that kindness transcends titles, fame, and appearances. It is a force that lives within every heart willing to choose it. As the city lights shimmered into the night, one thing remained clear: kindness doesn't need a name. It just needs a heart.